Hey guys, tonight we're going back nearly 1,000 years. Back to when the shape of England itself was about to be rewritten, and nobody was sleeping very soundly. You're standing at the edge of a quiet Anglo-Saxon village, somewhere along the southern coast. The salt wind carrying both the smell of the sea and the sharper tang of sheep manure. Lantern light flickers through gaps in thatched roofs, and somewhere a dog barks at nothing. Or maybe not at nothing, because lately, everyone's been whispering about sails spotted on the horizon, about strangers with strange tongues and sharper swords. You probably wouldn't last a night here, honestly, between the drafty walls, the constant fear, and the ale that tastes suspiciously like wet bread. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me down in the comments, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly down a dirt path pressed flat by bare feet and wooden cart wheels, the frost crunching under your boots. Every house you pass leans a little, as though the wind and years have been conspiring to topple them. A curtain of smoke drifts from low chimneys, bringing the scent of peat fires, onions, and something else. Salt pork, maybe, if the family's lucky this week. Inside, people huddle together, speaking in voices just low enough for you to catch only fragments. They're talking about the omens, about the way the gulls have been screaming over the harbor, about the man who swears he saw sails in the dawn fog. And the thing is, they're not entirely wrong. The channel has been restless. Trade ships whisper back and forth about Norman knights sharpening their lances, and Duke William's name hangs in the air like the taste of iron. But in this moment, for the villagers, the fear is more immediate and more domestic. The knowledge that everything they know might be gone before the next harvest. A group of children dart past you, one of them holding what might be a sword if you squint, or perhaps just a stick whittled down by boredom. They're pretending to be warriors, charging at each other with shrieks of mock battle. You watch them tumble into the frost-hardened grass, their laughter quick and bright. The adults don't smile. You notice a man tightening the rope that keeps his goat penned in, his eyes flicking toward the dark line of the sea as though he expects it to spit out monsters at any moment. The wind shifts. You catch the distant thud of waves, the creak of a boat's mast. Could be just another fishing vessel making its way back to port. But the tension in the air is such that every sound feels like a warning. The night here isn't quiet. It breathes, it mutters, and every shadow seems to lean toward you. You step out past the last hut and onto a small rise where the land drops toward the beach. From here, you can see the black outline of the coastline, jagged and stubborn against the restless water. Somewhere far out, beyond what your eyes can pierce, history is already moving toward you. The sails will come. The language will change. The laws, the lords, the very stones of the castles yet unbuilt. They're already in motion. And you, poor thing, are standing in the middle of it, whether you like it or not. Somewhere in the darkness behind you, a door slams. A woman's voice calls a name, sharp and urgent. A gull wheels overhead, silent for once. And then, as if on cue, the wind brings the faint scent of tar and foreign spices. Clues from a place you've never seen, but will soon come to know all too well. You might think you have time, but in 1066, time runs like a startled hare. The whispers you've been hearing, they're about to turn into the roar of men and steel, and there will be no turning back. The night is restless, and so are you. You've been standing on that rise so long the damp is starting to creep through your boots, chilling your toes until they feel like stones. Down in the village, most of the lamps have gone out, but not all. There's still a faint glow from the alehouse, a low building that leans heavily to one side as though it's had a few too many of its own drinks. From inside comes the rumble of voices, the occasional crash of a mug on a table, and, beneath it all, the low mutter of something darker. You step toward it, the mud sucking softly at your heels. The door hangs open just enough for light and heat to spill into the narrow lane. Inside, the smell is a mix of stale ale, smoke, and sweat, like a sauna run by people who don't believe in bathing. Men hunch over rough-hewn tables, their faces lit from below by tallow candles. They're speaking in the old tongue, but even without understanding every word, you can catch the rhythm of fear. The words Norman and Duke come up again and again, like sour notes in a song. A tall man with a face weathered like an old oak leans back on his bench and gestures with a tankard. He's telling a story about a light in the sky, some kind of fiery streak that burned across the heavens last spring. He swears it was an omen, sent by God to warn them of what's coming. A comet, someone else murmurs, crossing themselves. You've heard of it too. Word travels faster than wagons in these parts when the sky itself is involved. Some say it means William of Normandy is blessed by heaven. Others say it's the devil's torch. One man snorts into his drink. The Normans won't come, he says, though he doesn't sound convinced. Too far. Too risky. You notice his hands are trembling slightly as he sets his mug down. Another replies that the Duke is a patient man, and patient men are dangerous. You file that away, because it's the kind of thing you'll remember when the sails appear. Outside again, the air feels sharper, cleaner. You tilt your head and listen, to the far-off sea, to the faint creak of the village's wooden watchtower swaying in the wind. There's a guard up there, wrapped in a cloak, staring out into the blackness. He probably can't see any more than you can, but his eyes don't waver from the water. You wonder if he's imagining what it will look like when the horizon sprouts masts like a forest rising from the waves. The path beyond the village narrows, winding between hedges and low stone walls. Your breath steams in the night air, and you notice how the moonlight catches the frost on the grass, making the whole landscape look like it's been dusted in silver. It's beautiful in the way danger sometimes is, right before it stops being beautiful and starts being deadly. You pass a small chapel, its wooden door barred for the night. Inside, the priest sleeps in a cot beside the altar. Earlier in the evening, you'd seen him blessing the children, his hands moving quickly, as though speed could make the prayer stronger. The villagers here don't just pray for safety. They pray for time. Time to finish the harvest, time to prepare, time to hope that all of this is just another story that will fade before the next winter. But you can't shake the feeling that the story isn't going anywhere. You feel it in the way the air seems to hold its breath, in the way even the animals seem quieter tonight. No bleating sheep, no restless hens clucking in the dark. Just the wind and the sea keeping each other company. Then, as you crest a low hill, you see it. A faint, flickering light far out over the water. Could be a fishing boat. Could be. But as you watch, you think you see another. And another. Tiny, swaying embers on the dark horizon. You blink and they're gone. You tell yourself it's nothing, that it's just the night playing tricks. But somewhere deep inside, you know better. By morning, the village is a different creature entirely. The mist has rolled in from the sea, soft and pale, swallowing the rooftops so that they seem to float in a world made only of smoke and silence. You step out into it, your breath mixing with the fog, and for a moment you can't tell where the sky ends and the earth begins. Somewhere in that whiteness, a rooster calls, late, as though even he is reluctant to face whatever this day might bring. The dirt underfoot is damp and cold, sticking to your boots. From the direction of the longhouse, you hear the muffled sound of voices. Men gathered early, their words clipped and urgent. You pass the doorway just in time to catch Harold Godwinson's name. It's spoken with a kind of hesitant reverence, as though they can't quite decide whether he's the savior they need or the gamble they've been forced to take. You remember the day the news came. King Edward the Confessor was dead. The bells had rung, mournful and slow, carrying the weight of centuries with each strike. There had been no time for grief, not really. Before the earth was even packed over Edward's grave, Harold had been crowned, the crown itself still warm from the last head it touched. It had felt fast, too fast. In the market square, if you can call a muddy patch with 3 stalls a market, 2 old women are arguing about what Harold's coronation means. One insists that God himself has chosen Harold, that the Witan, the Council of Nobles, would never back a man without divine favor. The other shakes her head, muttering about promises made across the sea to a certain Duke of Normandy. The words oath and betrayal hiss like steam between their teeth. A boy darts past you, carrying a bundle of rushes for the hearth. He trips, scattering them into the mud, and as he stoops to gather them again, he glances up at you with wide eyes. "They say the Duke's coming," he whispers, as though the mist might overhear, "with more men than there are stars." You don't have the heart to tell him that stars are countless, and that armies, well, they only seem that way when they're marching toward you. You wander toward the edge of the village, where the fields stretch out like pale quilts beneath the fog. Farmers move slowly through them, checking the fences, counting their sheep. You can see the way their shoulders hunch, not against the cold, but against a future that feels heavier than the present. One man stops to adjust the leather strap holding his scythe. He glances at you and says, "If the Normans land, these fields'll belong to them before the grass grows again." He says it without anger, without hope, just fact. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you can't help but think about Harold himself. Right now, the new king is likely in London, wearing the weight of England on his head. The Witan has spoken, the crown has been placed, and yet his enemies aren't the sort to be soothed by ceremony. To the north, Harold Hardrada of Norway sharpens his ambitions like a blade. To the south, across the channel, William of Normandy nurses a claim built on oaths, blood, and a fair bit of personal outrage. Harold may have the throne, but the throne is a seat without legs unless he can keep it standing. You pause at the crest of a small hill. Through a tear in the mist, you see the glimmer of the sea. For just a second, the memory of last night's faint lights comes back to you. Those wavering embers on the horizon. The tide has shifted now, the beach stretching wide and empty below. There's nothing there, but still your skin prickles. Back in the village, the church bell tolls once, low and heavy. It's not a summons. It's a warning. The bell's low note lingers in the air like the aftertaste of smoke. You follow it toward the small church at the center of the village, the damp fog curling around its timber walls. The door creaks as you push it open, revealing the dim interior, just a few candles sputtering on the altar, their light making the shadows lean and sway. The smell here is a mix of beeswax, cold stone, and damp wool cloaks hung on pegs. A few villagers kneel in the pews, heads bowed, lips moving silently. At the front, the priest's voice is soft but urgent. He speaks of endings and beginnings, of the passing of the old king and the uncertain hand of the new. The news of Edward the Confessor's death has settled over the land like a frost, silent, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. Even here, far from London, you can feel its weight. Edward had been king for over 2 decades, a ruler who seemed more at home in prayer than in politics. His devotion had been legendary, so much so that some whispered he'd neglected his duties as a monarch in favor of heavenly concerns. But now, his pale hands are folded in eternal rest, and his body lies beneath Westminster Abbey, freshly consecrated just days before his passing. You step closer to the altar, the boards creaking under your feet. You can almost picture it, Edward's final hours. The cold chamber, the drawn curtains, the low murmur of priests reciting prayers for the dying. The courtiers standing in tense silence, each one already calculating the angles of power. Some would say he named Harold Godwinson as his heir with his last breath. Others insist his heart and the throne had been promised to William of Normandy years before, sealed by an oath Harold himself had sworn. And there it is, that word again. Oath. In this world, it's heavier than iron and sharper than any sword. Break it, and men will march across oceans to make you pay. The priest's voice breaks slightly as he speaks of the funeral procession. How the city streets were lined with mourners, how the winter air carried the sound of the bells all the way to the river. But beneath his reverence, you can hear something else. The quiet dread that the death of a king is never just the death of a man. It's an invitation, an opening, and someone somewhere is already stepping through. As you leave the church, the fog has thickened, wrapping the village in a kind of muffled stillness. You hear a hammer striking metal in the smithy, the sound sharper than usual, like each blow is meant to ward off the future. Children run past, chasing each other with wooden swords, their shouts echoing through the mist. Life goes on, but it's a life lived under a sky that feels lower than it did yesterday. You can't help but imagine the moment Edward's breath stopped. The way the chamber might have felt colder, as if the heat went with him. The way the silence might have grown heavy enough to press on the chest. And the way, somewhere far from that bed, the first Norman shipwright might have driven the first nail into a keel, without even knowing why the work suddenly felt more urgent. You glance toward the sea. The horizon is gone, swallowed by fog. But you don't need to see it to know the truth. Something is already moving toward England, silent and unstoppable. By the time the news of Edward's death has rippled its way down every muddy road and into every market stall, the coronation is already done. No drawn-out process, no long debate. Harold Godwinson sits on the throne now, the crown heavy on his brow before the late king's grave has even settled. You hear the story in pieces, carried by travelers whose boots are caked with London's frozen mud. It happened at Westminster Abbey, they say, the very place Edward had just consecrated. The air inside still smelled faintly of fresh-cut oak and damp plaster from its completion, and the gilded stone seemed to glow in the thin winter light. Harold had stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, his face steady but his jaw set like a man bracing for impact. The Witan had chosen him. Some said the dying king himself had named him heir. And yet, outside the abbey, the crowd had been strange, cheers, yes, but muted, scattered among murmurs and sidelong glances. You can imagine the sound, a half-hearted wave of celebration that doesn't quite reach the shore. It's the sort of reception you get when you're promoted at work because your boss mysteriously vanished, and everyone's quietly wondering if you had something to do with it. Inside, the coronation unfolded with the proper solemnity. Robes, oaths, the archbishop's steady voice. But even there, unease crept in. You picture the Norman envoys standing stiff at the back, their eyes unreadable, already composing the angry letters they'll send to Duke William. Some Anglo-Saxon nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if half expecting the abbey doors to burst open and a fully armed Norman delegation to march in demanding the crown be handed over. Back in your village, the reactions are mixed. In the alehouse, a grizzled fisherman slams his mug down and declares Harold the right choice. A man of our own blood, not some French-tongued pretender. But in the corner, another man mutters that the Duke of Normandy will never let this stand. A woman stirring a pot by the fire says she's heard the Duke is already gathering ships. The Normans keep their grudges warm, she warns. You take a walk to the edge of the fields, where the cold wind cuts straight through your cloak. Somewhere far off, You hear the bleating of sheep and the distant crash of waves. The sea looks the same as it did yesterday, but you can't help imagining it hiding an army just beyond the curve of the world. Harold, meanwhile, must know he's inherited more than a crown. He's inherited a storm, the kind that doesn't just blow in, it builds low and slow until the air itself feels charged. You picture him that night after the coronation, alone in his chamber, the weight of the crown pressing into his skull, wondering if this day will be remembered as the start of his reign or the countdown to his downfall. And you, still here on the coast, can almost hear the faint, rhythmic hammering of Norman shipwrights across the water. Could just be your imagination, or it could be history knocking on England's door. The wind changes first. You notice it one morning when you step outside. The air has that restless edge, carrying the tang of salt and something colder, sharper, like a warning whispered in your ear. The gulls are flying lower than usual, their calls sounding oddly urgent. Out on the horizon, the line between sea and sky is smeared into a single shifting gray. In London, Harold must be pacing. Word has reached him that William of Normandy is furious, proper, seething fury, the kind that turns political ambition into personal vendetta. The Duke claims Harold swore an oath to support his claim to the English throne, and breaking it is more than a slight. It's an insult that demands blood. Harold can't ignore that. But the Channel is no glassy pond this winter. The storms roll in heavy, each one smashing against the coast like a war drum. Even here in your village, you can feel them. Nights when the wind howls hard enough to rattle shutters. Days when the tide surges higher than you've seen in years. Merchant ships limp into harbor with torn sails and broken masts, their crews looking like they've wrestled the sea itself. Some say the gales are God's will, holding William back. Others whisper that the Normans are using the bad weather as cover, building something far more dangerous than a fishing fleet. Harold doesn't waste the time. While the storms hammer the southern coast, he summons his FYRD, the local levies, farmers turned soldiers overnight. You see them pass through the muddy lanes. Men with pitchforks over their shoulders, borrowed helmets sliding too far down their brows, boots still crusted with field dirt. They march toward the gathering points where trained housecarls wait, those tall, axe-wielding warriors who move with the easy confidence of men who've been in real fights. You get a glimpse of the preparations along the coast. Timber is hauled to the shore to reinforce watchtowers. Carts rattle past loaded with salted meat, barrels of ale, bundles of arrows. Smithies burn through the night, their chimneys coughing sparks into the wind. And everywhere, people talk about William, half in fear, half in disbelief that anyone would be mad enough to cross the Channel in weather like this. The rain comes in sheets some days, blurring the world into wet streaks. You picture the Norman coast, where William's shipwrights must be working under the same bitter sky, hammering planks into place, caulking seams, sharpening spear points. Maybe they curse the storms as much as Harold's men bless them. One night, you stand at the shore during a lull in the weather. The tide is low, the sand cold beneath your boots. The moon hangs thin and pale, its reflection trembling in the black water. In that fragile silence between storms, you think you hear something, just faintly, the hollow knock of wood on wood, the slow creak of a rope under tension. It could be a fishing boat moored somewhere down the coast, or it could be the first of William's ships, testing the water. Some historians still argue whether the storms truly saved Harold in those months, or if William was simply waiting for the right moment. But standing there with the wind brushing your cheek and the dark stretching endlessly ahead, you feel the truth. Nature can only hold back ambition for so long. You think the danger is all to the south, that if you keep your eyes fixed on the Channel, you'll see history coming for you. But the north has its own storms, and these don't ride the wind, they ride longships. The first rumors trickle in with merchants from York, strange sails on the horizon, carved prows shaped like snarling beasts, and men with armor that catches the sun in blinding flashes. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, has decided England should be his. The name rolls through the alehouses like a sudden cold draft. Hardrada, the hard ruler, a man whose life is one long saga of war, exile, and comeback stories. He fought in the Byzantine Varangian Guard, led campaigns from the Mediterranean to the Baltic, and now he's come for your island, convinced he has a claim through old agreements no one here even remembers clearly. Some say he's too old for this, a warrior past his prime. But others remember his victories and whisper that age just means he's had more time to learn how to win. And he's not alone. Tostig Godwin's son, yes, Harold's own estranged brother, has thrown in with him, nursing his grudge like a fine ale. Family reunions in England are rarely peaceful, but this one's going to involve axes. In the south, Harold can't ignore it. The man's barely gotten his boots muddy training for William, and now he's told there's a Viking army sailing down from the north. It's the medieval version of getting a fire alarm during a flood drill. You can imagine his frustration. He's got one hand gripping a shield on the coast, and now the other is reaching for a sword far inland. You decide to follow the whispers northward. The air changes as you travel, sharper, brisker, carrying the smell of pine and peat. The roads grow rougher, the village is smaller, but the tension is the same. People glance at the river as if expecting sleek, black hulls to glide up at any moment. At night, in the glow of hearth fires, old men tell you about the last time Vikings came, how they burned and took and left nothing but ash in the snow. Hardrada's forces make landfall with brutal efficiency. They move along the rivers like the water belongs to them, their oars slicing in perfect rhythm. You picture their camps, tents low to the ground, shields propped in neat rows, the smell of roasting meat mingling with the tang of pitch from their ships. There's a kind of terrible beauty to it, the way they seem like part of the landscape, cold, precise, inevitable. Some historians argue that if Hardrada had come just a little earlier, before Harold was crowned, England might have folded to him entirely. But history loves bad timing, and so the king in the south must march north, leaving the southern coast less guarded, hoping the storms keep William in his cage a little longer. One evening, as you pass through a market town along the route north, you see Harold's army arriving. Mud clings to their cloaks, but their pace is relentless. Harold himself rides at the front, eyes forward, his expression hard enough to cut stone. You realize you're looking at a man who knows he's running headfirst into one battle while another waits for him behind. The Vikings aren't here yet, but you can feel them, like a shadow stretching ahead of a figure you haven't quite turned to face. You hear them before you see them. The morning air is still damp from a night of rain, and somewhere beyond the low hills, the sound rises, a low, steady roar, like a waterfall made of voices. Then, over the slope, the glint of metal catches the sun, and the ground seems to hum under your boots. The Vikings have arrived. Fulford lies just outside York, a patchwork of fields and ditches bordered by the River Ouse. On this day, it's not a sleepy crossing. It's a trap in the making. The English Earls Edwin and Morcar are here, their levies drawn up in tight ranks, shields locked together, spears bristling forward. They've chosen this ground to block Harold Hardrada's advance, hoping the marshy banks will slow the Norse charge. You stand among the bystanders on a distant rise, close enough to see the formation, far enough to pretend you're just curious, rather than about to be in mortal danger. Then the longship men come into view. They're taller than you expect, their mail shirts moving like scales when they walk, axes swinging at their sides. The banners flap in the wind, Hardrada's raven, black on white, and beside it, Tostig's emblem. You can almost imagine the tension between them. two men from entirely different worlds bound together by ambition and revenge. The first clash is like the sea hitting a cliff. The Vikings surge forward, their shield wall slamming into the English line with a crack of wood and metal that you feel in your teeth. Arrows hiss overhead, thudding into shields, sometimes into softer targets. Men grunt, shout, and curse. Some in Old Norse, some in English, all in the universal language of "don't die right now." It's chaos, but also strangely ordered, waves of advance and retreat, like a brutal dance. You catch sight of Hardrada himself in the melee, a towering figure in a blue tunic over his mail, swinging a massive two-handed sword as if it weighs nothing. Every so often he roars a command, and his men shift like a single living thing, pressing harder. The marsh that was meant to help the English turns against them. Their footing slips, their line bends, and suddenly the Vikings find a gap. It's like watching ice crack under too much weight. Once it starts, it spreads fast. The Norse push through, cutting the defenders in two. You see Edwin's standard dip, then vanish in the crush of bodies. By midday, the field belongs to Hardrada. The English survivors scatter toward York, their losses heavy. The riverbank is littered with dropped shields, bent spears, and the still forms of men who won't be going home. The Vikings, victorious, don't waste time. They move to claim the city's surrender. York, sensing what's coming, offers hostages and provisions. The deal is struck. The Norse will take more hostages at a meeting in a few days, sealing their control. You stand there as the smoke from the burning edges of the battlefield curls into the sky. Some historians still argue whether Edwin and Morcar ever had a chance, or if they were doomed the moment Hardrada's keel touched English sand. But from here, watching the ravens circle overhead, it feels like the North has already fallen. And you know what this means. Harold Godwin's son, somewhere far to the south, will have no choice but to come running. You barely have time to let the echoes of Fulford fade before the news sweeps through the countryside like a gust that rattles every door. Harold Godwin's son is coming north. Fast. When I say fast, I don't mean the kind of medieval march where you stop for a long lunch, tell a few stories, and get distracted by a particularly nice tree. I mean 8 days from London to York, almost 200 miles, on foot, in armor, through September mud. That's the sort of speed that makes modern marathoners look like they're sightseeing. You imagine the blisters, the smell, the aching muscles, and you think, yeah, you'd probably accidentally trip into a ditch just to get a break. But Harold doesn't give them a break. He knows exactly what's at stake. The North can't be left to Hardrada and Tostig, not just because of the territory, but because if the Vikings hold York, they'll have a base to dig into, recruit from, and make England fight on two fronts. And remember, the southern coast is still basically a William of Normandy. Please invade here, welcome Matt. Every hour Harold spends up north is another hour the Normans could be crossing the channel. The army that arrives outside York isn't just fast. It's fresh in spirit, if not in feet. The men's faces are streaked with road dust, but their eyes are sharp, and they have surprise on their side. Hardrada and Tostig think Harold is still days away, probably catching his breath in London. So when Harold's scouts report the Norse camp near the village of Stamford Bridge, the opportunity is too good to pass up. The morning of the attack, the air is bright and crisp, with the first hints of autumn curling the edges of the leaves. You approach from a ridge and look down into the valley. The Vikings are scattered, many without armor, enjoying the rare luxury of an English sun. Some are bathing in the Derwent River, others lounging on the grass. Their longships are anchored far downriver, and the rest of their army, along with their armor, are back at Rickcall, a good march away. It's a rare moment in history when the deadliest men in Europe are basically caught in their pajamas. Harold's troops descend without warning. The shock is total. You can almost hear Hardrada's disbelief, How could this army possibly be here already? The Vikings scramble to form a shield wall, some fighting barefoot, their helmets still lying in neat piles back at camp. Then comes the moment you've probably heard in every retelling. The lone Viking at the bridge, armed with a massive axe. He holds the narrow crossing against wave after wave of English attackers, cutting down anyone who dares step within reach. The English can't get past him, until, according to one version, a soldier slips under the bridge in the shallow water and drives a spear upward into the man's body. Whether that's exactly how it happened, or just the kind of detail medieval storytellers love to toss in, historians still debate. But you can't deny it makes for a cinematic scene. Once the bridge is taken, the English pour across. The battle is brutal and close. Hardrada himself charges forward, sword in both hands, his height and strength cutting a path through the press, until an arrow finds his throat. They say he fell without a word, and for a moment the Vikings faltered. But Tostig rallies them, refusing to yield. The fighting rages for hours until the Norse are surrounded and broken. The survivors are given a choice: swear never to return or die here. Out of the hundreds of ships that brought them, only a few dozen sail back to Norway. The rest of the keels rot where they're beached. You'd think Harold could breathe easy now, maybe have a long drink and a longer sleep. But even as he's counting the cost in lives and wounds, a rider approaches, spurring his horse hard. You can read the urgency in his eyes before he even speaks. The Normans have landed. You're still standing on the field at Stamford Bridge. Mud on your boots, the tang of blood in the air, when the message cuts through everything like a bell in a quiet church. William has landed at Pevensey. For a heartbeat, no one moves. You watch Harold take it in, jaw tightening just a fraction. Then the orders start flying. There's no time for speeches, no time for the wounded to heal, no time for the dead to be buried properly. The Viking threat in the north is crushed, but the real storm, the one everyone's been dreading, has just made landfall in the south. If the march up here was brutal, the march back down is a test of sheer willpower. The men have barely slept in over a week, their armor still dented from Viking axes, their bodies aching from the fight. Now Harold's pushing them nearly the same distance in less time. You try to imagine their thoughts. Every step south is a reminder that they'll be facing another battle, one they might not win, and that their homes could be burning even as they walk. The route takes you through villages where people stand silently at the roadside, watching the weary column pass. Some hold out bread or ale. Others just stare, knowing these men are marching into history. The autumn wind has turned sharper now, carrying the smell of wood smoke and wet earth. You keep your cloak tight, but the chill still finds its way in. As you get closer to the coast, you hear stories filtering in. William's forces have been burning and looting to draw Harold into battle. It's a calculated cruelty, and it works. Harold could wait for reinforcements from the FYRD or Thanes still gathering inland, but that means giving William more time to dig in. Instead, he chooses speed again. When the army reaches London, there's a brief pause, just long enough to pull in more men from the southern shires. The city hums with tension. Merchants whisper about which side will win. Priests hold extra masses. Armorers hammer through the night. You notice Harold spends much of his time in council with his brothers Gyrth and Leofwine, maps and messages scattered like fallen leaves across the table. By the time the host leaves London for Hastings, the moon is thin and white in the cold sky. Harold moves ahead of the main column, riding hard, determined to meet William before the Norman cavalry can range too far inland. You can almost hear the ticking clock in his head. Every hour matters. And then, on the morning of October 14th, you crest a hill and see them. Norman tents scattered across the fields, banners fluttering in the breeze, the faint shapes of men moving like ants in the distance. William's camp is ready, organized, and entirely unafraid. Harold orders his men to form up on the high ground at Senlac Hill. Shields are locked edge to edge, spears bristling out like a living wall. You can feel the tension vibrating through the line, not fear exactly, but the awareness that this is it. Everything that's happened, the summer watch for the Normans, the dash north to crush the Vikings, the brutal march back, has led to this single morning. Some historians argue Harold should have delayed, rested his army, let William make the first move inland. Others say his choice to stand here was the only way to keep London safe. From where you're standing now, with the wind biting at your ears and the sight of Norman cavalry trotting into position below, there's no time left for what-ifs. The horns sound, and the hill waits. The horns split the morning air like a blade, sharp enough to make you flinch even through the leather of your helmet straps. Below, the Normans begin to move, slow at first in disciplined ranks, the sunlight catching on polished mail. William's cavalry leads, their destriers snorting white clouds into the cool air, hooves drumming a steady, menacing rhythm that you can feel in your chest. You stand shoulder to shoulder in Harold's shield wall, the weight of your round shield pressing into your forearm, the rim knocking against your neighbor's. The line stretches left and right along the ridge, tight as the zipper on a winter coat. You can smell the oiled wood, the sweat of the men beside you, and the faint, distant tang of sea salt drifting in from the coast. The Normans come in 3 divisions, Bretons on the left, Normans in the center under William himself, and French allies on the right. Their banners ripple, bright colors against the muted greens and browns of the English hill. The first wave advances with deliberate purpose, shields forward, spears poised. Behind them, archers knock arrows, their bowstrings creaking in unison. Then the air fills with the hiss of arrows. You duck behind your shield, the thuds and splinters rattling down the line. Some shafts glance off the wooden rims, others find gaps, and here and there a man drops with a choked cry. But the shield wall holds. The men mutter quick prayers or spit on the ground, readying for the next phase. The cavalry charge comes like a rolling storm. The ground shudders as the horses close the distance, lances leveled, hooves tearing up clods of earth. You brace, knees bent, shield locked against the press. When the impact comes, it's a chaos of sound. Wood cracking, men shouting, horses screaming as they rear against the wall of English spears. Some riders are thrown, trampled underfoot. Others will away, seeking a weak spot. But the wall doesn't break. Not yet. There's a strange, almost comic moment in the midst of the carnage. A Norman knight tumbles from his saddle right in front of you, helmet rolling downhill like a kicked bucket. He scrambles to his feet, sword in hand, only to vanish in the crush of bodies. You can't help thinking he's going to be very annoyed about losing that helmet, assuming he lives to miss it. The first attacks fail to crack Harold's line, and the Normans pull back to regroup. Arrows whistle again, this time arcing higher in an attempt to rain down behind your shields. You hear Harold's voice somewhere along the ridge, calm, steady, calling for the line to hold. His brothers Gywertach and Leofwine are in the thick of it, their own shields battered but unbroken. Then comes the rumor, quick, sharp, spreading like fire in dry grass. William is dead. You glance downhill and see the Breton flank wavering, men glancing back toward the center. For a moment, it looks like the entire Norman attack might collapse. Later, chroniclers will say this was the turning point that almost ended the battle before noon. Historians still argue whether the rumor started naturally or if it was part of William's plan. But the next moment, the Duke himself rides forward, tearing off his helmet so everyone can see his face, shouting that he lives. The effect is electric. The Normans rally, reforming their lines, the cavalry wheeling back into position. The hill, which had started to feel like a fortress, suddenly feels smaller. You realize this fight isn't going to be quick, and the sun is still climbing. By midday, the sun is hanging high, a pale coin behind thin clouds, and the field below looks like someone has been shaking a snow globe filled with steel and dust. You're still in the same spot on the ridge, legs burning from the constant brace, shield arm numb from deflecting blows. The air smells of sweat, mud, and that coppery tang you don't want to think too much about. The Normans have settled into a grim rhythm. Volleys of arrows to keep you ducking, cavalry surges to test the wall, and infantry pushes to exploit even the smallest gaps. Every time they pull back, you hear the groans of the wounded being dragged behind the line, and the clink of fresh arrows being handed up. Every time they come again, your knuckles whiten around your spear shaft, and you wonder how much longer your body can keep this up. Then something changes. On the left flank, the Breton forces falter under the pressure of the English Huscarls. Men who've been swinging axes with the kind of stamina that makes your shoulders ache in sympathy. The Bretons start to give ground, then to retreat downhill. It looks like a rout. This is where the danger slips in. The men beside you cheer, a ragged, desperate sound. Some of the FYRD, less disciplined than the professional Huscarls, see the enemy's back and can't resist. They break formation, chasing the retreating Bretons down the slope. You can almost hear Harold's voice in your head. Hold the line. But the slope swallows those words, and the thrill of the chase swallows reason. From your vantage point, you see what the pursuers don't. William's cavalry wheeling around like a door slamming shut. The retreat wasn't panic at all. It was bait. The scattered English are cut down in moments, their shouts turning to screams, and the Normans surge back uphill with renewed momentum. The shield wall has to knit itself together again, but the gap left by the fallen is too wide in places. You find yourself pressed closer to the man on your right, your shields overlapping more than before. The impact of the next charge slams through your bones, and for the first time today you feel the line shiver under the strain. Still, Harold is there, on foot, in the thick of the fight, his banner with the golden cross standing firm. Every time you catch a glimpse of it above the helmets, you feel something in your chest steady. The English king is here, not sending orders from a tent, not hiding behind a wall, but here, sharing the same mud and arrows and danger. Somewhere in the chaos, you spot a Norman standard-bearer go down, his flag trampled underfoot. It's a small thing in the scale of the battle, but the cheer it sparks runs like an electric pulse through the men nearest you. By now, the historians will tell you, both sides know this is going to be a test of endurance as much as tactics. William will need to break the wall before nightfall or risk losing his grip on the campaign entirely. Harold will need to keep it standing until darkness forces the Normans to retreat. The stakes have boiled down to a single stubborn truth. Whoever still holds their ground at the end of the day wins England. And as the afternoon light starts to tilt, the Normans prepare for another wave. This one feels different, tighter, more deliberate. You can't say why, but the hairs on your neck rise. The afternoon light has a way of making everything sharper. The glint of mail, the edge of a blade, the pale lines of exhaustion etched into every face around you. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else now, stiff and trembling all at once. The shield digs into your forearm with every heartbeat, and the strap rubs raw against your wrist. You keep telling yourself, one more push, one more block, one more breath. Down the slope, the Normans aren't charging blindly anymore. You watch as their archers step forward in staggered lines, loosing higher, slower arcs. The arrows come down like steel rain, clattering over your shields and dropping with that soft, almost polite thunk into the turf. They're not aiming to pierce this time. They're aiming to keep your heads down. Behind the archers, the cavalry assembles again, but this time their formation is tighter, their pace deliberate. You hear the shouts in Norman French, commands you can't quite make out but can feel in the synchronized movements. It's not the reckless pounding charge from before. This feels like the prelude to something layered, something thought through. When they come, it's in waves. The first is the cavalry, spears out, testing the shield wall, pulling back before committing fully. The second is infantry, rushing in to hack at exposed legs or pry at shield rims with hooked axes. And while you're dealing with them, the archers keep up their rhythm, peppering the ridge so you can't relax for a breath. Somewhere to your left, a section of the line gives way for a heartbeat before reforming. It's like watching a dam swell and ripple under the force of floodwater. A few men go down, and the press to close the gap nearly topples you. The man to your right, older, with a beard gone patchy under the sweat, grunts something about his wife's Sunday roast being less trouble than this. You manage a short laugh, which feels absurd in the middle of all this noise and death. William's feigned retreats happen again, but now more controlled. The enemy surges forward a little each time, dragging parts of the English line downhill. It's death by inches, and you can sense the Normans are counting on it. Historians will later argue whether Harold should have sent reserves to plug the thinning spots or whether holding the ridge at all costs was still the wiser move. From where you stand, soaked in sweat and grit, both options look like losing hands. The Duke himself seems everywhere at once, riding the lines, rallying his men, pointing where to press and when to pull back. You catch a glimpse of him mid-charge, his sword rising and falling, his white horse streaked with mud up to the flank. Even if you hate him in this moment, you can't deny he's no tent-bound general. By late afternoon, you can feel the battle shifting. Not in a sudden lurch, but in the subtle way your own arms feel heavier, your stance a fraction slower. The shouts from Harold's end of the line are still steady, but they carry an edge now, a steeliness that says he knows the ridge won't hold forever. The next push will be the one that matters. You can tell in the way the Normans pull back farther than before, the way their banners regroup into a single knot. The pause is almost worse than the fighting, your mind filling the silence with what's coming. And then, as if someone had struck a drum, the final great charge begins to form below. The air goes still in that strange way it sometimes does before a storm. No wind, no birdsong, just the quiet pulse of your own blood in your ears. Down the slope, the Norman lines compress, banners shifting closer together like the tightening of a fist. Cavalry in the center, infantry flanking, archers setting themselves on the outer edges. This isn't probing anymore. This is the hammer meant to smash the wall for good. Your shield feels heavier than it did a minute ago. You adjust your grip, flexing numb fingers, telling yourself the tingling in your arms is just fatigue, not fear. But you know better. Fear is the constant companion of anyone who stood in one place for hours while death rolls toward them in waves. You just learn to dress it up as focus. The Normans advance in 3 layers. First, the archers step up and loose in rapid succession, their arrows catching the late sun and raining down like flickers of gold that sting instead of warm. This time, their aim is higher, trying to arc over the wall into the softer spots behind the front rank. You hear the dull, wet thuds of hits you can't see. Then the cavalry. They come hard and fast, spears leveled, the thunder of their hooves making the ground vibrate under your boots. You feel the impact ripple through the shield wall as they crash. Metal against oak, horseflesh against human will. The noise is overwhelming, snorts, shouts, steel ringing, the groan of wood under pressure. Before you can breathe, the infantry pours in. They're quicker than the mounted knights, darting into the smallest openings, hacking low, stabbing high. You find yourself meeting the eyes of a young Norman. He can't be more than 17, as your spear finds his shoulder. He stumbles back, vanishing into the press. You don't see if he falls or is carried away. You don't have time. On your left, a section of the wall collapses entirely. The gap is like a wound and the Normans pour into it. Harold's household troops, the Huscarls, move fast, axes swinging in deadly arcs, cutting down men and horses alike to seal the breach. You've heard people call them the iron backbone of the army, and now you understand why. They fight like the ridge itself will crumble without them. Somewhere in the chaos, a cry goes up that William has fallen. It ripples through the Norman ranks, and for a heartbeat, the pressure eases. But then you see him, helmet pushed back so his face is clear, riding straight through the fray to show he's alive. The rally is immediate. The hammering resumes. The fighting stretches into a blur. No longer a sequence of moments, but one long, continuous effort to stand your ground. Your muscles scream, your throat is raw from shouting, and still the Normans keep coming. You're aware, dimly, that the sun is starting to dip, the light turning warmer, shadows stretching. But the Normans seem to sense it too. This is their last chance before nightfall, and they're willing to spend every man to break you. You brace one more time for the charge that might decide the fate of the ridge and of England itself. The sun is a low ember now, bleeding orange light across the ridge, making every helm and blade glint like it's been dipped in fire. The air smells of sweat, churned earth, and the copper tang of blood, a mixture so thick you could almost chew it. Your boots stick with each step, the ground turned to a treacherous paste of mud and worse. You've stopped thinking in words. Everything is sensation. The jolt of an impact against your shield, the sting of grit in your eyes, the hot line of a shallow cut along your forearm. Someone is shouting orders, maybe Harold, maybe one of his captains, but the words are lost in the roar. You just keep holding because that's all you know to do. And then, in the middle of this endless din, a single sound cuts through, sharp, almost delicate. The snap of a bowstring. You don't see the archer who loosed it. Maybe he's far down the slope, or maybe he's one of the ones who's crept closer under cover of the cavalry. What you see, what you can't not see, is the arrow itself, a black needle against the burning sky, arcing high above the chaos. It's heading toward Harold's position. For a heartbeat, you think it will miss, that it will vanish into the mass of helmets and shields. But it doesn't. It finds the smallest of openings, slipping under the rim of his helm. The cry that follows is like nothing you've heard all day. Not the clash of men dying in the press, but a ripple of disbelief and dread. The king staggers, clutching at his face. Some say the arrow strikes his eye. Others claim it's his cheek, and what follows is a Norman blade that finishes the work. Even here, historians will bicker over the details for centuries, as if the exact placement of the wound matters more than the way the battle's heart is suddenly torn open. Harold's Huscarls close around him instantly, hacking a furious perimeter into the Norman ranks. You glimpse flashes of axes rising and falling, their blows so hard you feel the shudder through the ground. But you can tell it's desperation, not defense. The news spreads like a chill wind down the line. The king is down, and that's when the ridge begins to break. Men who've stood all day without yielding now start to edge backward, some casting glances over their shoulders toward the forest. The shield wall thins, gaps forming faster than they can be filled. The Normans feel it too. Their pushes grow bolder, their shouts sharper, sensing the moment their enemies will begin to slip. You're still in the fight, still parrying, still thrusting when you can, but a part of you is watching it all from somewhere else, seeing the ridge not as a place you stand, but as a line in history that's just been crossed. This isn't holding the hill anymore. This is trying to get out alive. The collapse doesn't happen like a trapdoor dropping. No, it's slower, messier, like fabric tearing under too much weight. You feel it before you see it, a subtle loosening in the wall of bodies around you. Shields aren't locking tight anymore. The men beside you glance over their shoulders too often. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the backward steps begin. You tell yourself you're just repositioning, adjusting to keep the line even. But when a Norman spear nearly takes your leg and you hop back to save it, you realize you've given up a yard. Then another. The Normans don't need an invitation. They press harder, their cavalry pushing into the widening gaps, horses snorting clouds into the cooling air. The archers step forward now, loosing point blank into the chaos, their arrows thudding into shields or finding the flesh behind them. A man you've fought beside all day stumbles into you, an axe head buried in his shoulder. His mouth opens to say something, but nothing comes out. His eyes are already fixed somewhere far beyond the ridge. You shove him toward the rear, toward the medics, though deep down you know there's no rear anymore. The noise shifts. It's no longer the steady churn of battle. It's fragmented, jagged. Pockets of resistance are being swallowed again. The shield wall isn't breaking in one place. It's unraveling everywhere at once. And then you hear the sound that freezes you. The high, panicked scream of a warhorse breaking free of its rider. It charges sideways through the press, scattering men like leaves, knocking friend and foe alike to the ground. You barely dodge its flailing hooves. For a moment, all you see is mud and motion as you're shoved sideways into someone else's fight. The order comes down the line, though whether it's official or just the desperate cry of men who want to live, you can't tell. Fall back. The retreat is chaos. There's no formation, no safe path. You're dodging bodies, lunging around knots of men still trying to hold their ground. Some throw down shields to run faster. Others keep them up, heads ducked, as if they can ward off the inevitable with one last slab of oak. You angle toward the edge of the ridge, where the slope dips into a narrow copse of trees. It's slower going than you hoped. Fallen men, dropped weapons, the churned earth grabbing at your boots. You catch a glimpse of the Norman standard, the golden lions advancing steadily, almost leisurely now, like a predator that knows its prey has nowhere left to go. Somewhere behind you, the last of Harold's Huscarls make their stand, surrounded, swinging until they vanish under a wave of steel and bodies. The image lodges in your mind even as you push forward, like a flare burning in the dark. You reach the treeline just as the first Norman horsemen crest the ridge above, their silhouettes framed against the last blood-orange sliver of sun. The light is fading, but not fast enough to hide you. Branches whip at your face as you plunge into the shadows. The ground is uneven, roots catching your feet, but you keep moving. Every crash of underbrush behind you could be pursuit, or just your own ragged breath bouncing in your skull. Tonight, the ridge belongs to William. England, perhaps, too. But for now, you're not thinking about the fate of kingdoms. You're thinking about finding one more breath, one more step, one more place to hide until the dark swallows everything. The moon is up before you dare to stop moving. It hangs low and heavy, pale as bone, casting the world in shades of silver and shadow. Your breath finally slows, though each inhale still drags the taste of iron from the back of your throat. You press your palm to a tree trunk for balance, feeling the rough bark under your fingers, the faint tremor still running through them. When you step out from the treeline, the ridge is no longer a battlefield. It's something else entirely. The noise is gone. No clash of steel, no shouts, no thudding hooves. Just the slow, unsettling creak of leather straps and the occasional clink of metal as cooling bodies shift under their own weight. The field is a patchwork of light and dark. In the moon's glow, some shapes are stark and sharp, spears jutting from the ground like strange, skeletal plants. Others are just masses on the earth, impossible to tell at first glance whether they're friend or foe. The wind lifts the edges of cloaks and banners, flapping them softly like a slow applause for no one in particular. You step carefully, not out of reverence, but because you know what lies underfoot. Your boot brushes a helmet, its surface dented in a way that tells you someone's skull bore the same curve not long ago. A dropped shield leans against a broken spear. A Norman horse, its flank torn open, lies still with its eyes glassy and fixed on the stars. Then you see them, what's left of Harold's huskers. The moon makes them almost beautiful, their mail catching the light in tiny, silver pinpricks. They fell in a circle, weapons still in hand, as if they'd simply frozen mid-strike. You can almost imagine them rising again if the dawn demanded it. But there's no rising here, only settling. Somewhere off to your right, a pair of Norman soldiers pick their way across the slope, torches in hand. They're not searching for survivors to help. Their task is simpler, colder. Strip the valuables, finish the wounded, claim what the living can still use. You sink lower into the shadows, unwilling to find out whether they'd consider you worth the trouble. The air smells different now. Earlier, it was all sweat and churned mud, a living stench. Now it's heavier, thicker, edged with smoke from the scattered campfires beginning to sprout on the Norman side. That smoke mingles with the metallic tang in a way that makes you taste it without breathing deep. You keep moving, weaving between the fallen, not toward the Normans' torches, but toward a darker stretch of ridge where no light reaches. Each step feels slower, heavier, not from fear anymore, but from the strange weight of seeing the fight's end laid out so plainly. The living are few, the dead are countless, and you realize something uncomfortable. Tomorrow, this place will look almost the same. The banners will be gone, the torches snuffed, but the shapes on the ground will remain. Maybe for days, maybe weeks, until the earth decides to reclaim them. For now, under the cold moonlight, the battle's end feels less like a victory or a loss, and more like a long exhale the world didn't know it was holding. You find your place in the woods by feel more than sight. A hollow beneath the thick roots of an oak, its base surrounded by tangled brambles that seem determined to keep company only with themselves. You push through anyway, scratching your arms and catching your cloak on thorns until you can curl yourself in the dark. The earth here is damp, smelling of moss and old leaves, and for the first time since the ridge, you feel almost invisible. Almost, because the sounds carry, not the sounds you want. No familiar voices, no clink of your own camp's cooking pots, no lazy mutter of sentries speaking in the tongue you grew up with. Instead, the forest air is pierced by bursts of laughter from somewhere beyond the treeline. The Normans. It's not the polite kind of laughter you'd hear in a hall. It's jagged, tipsy, raw with adrenaline. They're celebrating. You picture them crowded around fires, faces glowing in the orange light, mugs sloshing as they toast each other. Maybe they're reenacting moments from the battle, one man pretending to take an arrow, another exaggerating the swing of his sword until the others roar. Every now and then there's a louder cheer, as if someone's brought out a prize, Harold's banner, perhaps, or a captured Saxon weapon of note. You can't see it, but you don't need to. The images paint themselves behind your eyelids without your permission. The night presses in. Cold creeps along your fingers and toes, urging you to tuck them tighter. You draw your cloak around you, but it's not enough to block out the truth rattling in your skull. You're cut loose now. Whatever was your side has shattered. The men you trained with, marched beside, maybe even laughed with this morning. Most of them are lying on the slope you left behind, and the forest knows it. You start to notice the small sounds, the crack of a twig far off, the flutter of wings overhead, the whisper of leaves shifting in a breeze you can't feel. A fox pads into view for half a second, its eyes catching a hint of starlight before it vanishes again. To it, you're just another lump in the undergrowth, not worth the curiosity. The Normans' voices rise again, this time joined by the faint, thin strains of music. Someone's brought a lute or a small harp, the kind of melody that would feel warm and safe if it weren't drifting from the camp of men who'd kill you without hesitation. Your stomach growls. You think about the last thing you ate, a strip of salted pork before dawn, and wonder how long it'll be before food is something you can take for granted again. Hunger gnaws, but moving to hunt or forage would mean exposing yourself. Tonight, you stay where you are, letting the ache settle in as part of you. Eventually, the fires in the distance seem to burn lower. The voices soften, one by one, until only the music remains. Then that, too, is swallowed by the forest. You don't sleep so much as drift, sliding in and out of shallow dreams. Each time you surface, the air feels colder, the ground harder, and the quiet deeper. And in that quiet, the thought returns. The world you knew ended today. It's not poetic. It's not noble. It's just done. Dawn arrives in pieces. At first, it's just the dim shift in the darkness, the black overhead bleeding into a deep slate. Then the air changes. Still cold, but thinner, easier to draw in without that midnight heaviness. You uncurl stiffly from your hollow under the oak, each joint complaining in its own voice. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else, and your back has collected every contour of the root system you slept against. The forest is different now. The night sounds have gone, replaced by the small, industrious noises of morning. Birds fussing in the branches, leaves dripping from a thin layer of dew. For a moment, you could almost pretend nothing has happened. Almost. But then you hear them. Beyond the treeline, the Normans are already moving. It's not the chaotic roar of battle or drunken celebration. This is something steadier, sharper. Voices bark short commands in that clipped Norman French, answered by the thud of tent stakes driven into the earth, the clatter of pots, the hiss of a fire being coaxed back to life. You creep forward, parting the brambles just enough to see. The open field you left in darkness is now a village of canvas and wood. Tents have sprung up overnight, orderly and deliberate, like they'd been waiting to grow here all along. Horses are tethered in neat rows, steam curling from their nostrils as they chew. Men move between the shelters, some carrying bundles of arrows, others dragging what's clearly spoils. Saxon shields, swords, even chunks of armor stripped from the fallen. Near the center, a tall banner snaps in the pale morning breeze. It's not just fabric, it's a statement. Bright colors, clean stitching, the kind of thing meant to remind everyone within sight who won and who didn't. You notice something else. Small clusters of locals, mostly women and older men, standing a cautious distance away. They've brought baskets, clay jugs, sacks slung over their shoulders. Food, you realize. Whether they're offering it freely or under order, you can't tell. A Norman soldier inspects each load before waving the bearer toward the camp. Some of the villagers glance over their shoulders as they leave, faces set in that flat expression people wear when they're holding in too much to let anything out. One Norman, tall, broad, his armor still smudged from yesterday, pauses to adjust the position of a sentry post. You watch him point toward the edge of the ridge, and two men take their places with crossbows ready. It's not paranoia, it's habit. Victors live longer if they stay ready for the next fight. A strange detail catches your eye. Near one of the fires, a group of soldiers is gathered around a table that wasn't there last night. It's a rough plank set over barrels, and on it lies a map weighted with knives at the corners. They're pointing at it, speaking low but intent, and every so often one man, clearly in charge, draws a line across it with a stick of charcoal. The battle might be over, but the work isn't. You sink back into the brush, heart thudding in a quieter but no less urgent rhythm. Seeing them like this, organized, efficient, settled, makes the scale of the loss sink in deeper. They're not just passing through. They're planting themselves. And the worst part? They look like they know exactly what they're doing. Somewhere behind you, a twig snaps. You turn sharply, breath catching. But it's only a gray squirrel bounding up a tree with something clutched in its mouth. Still, the sound makes you realize you can't stay here much longer. You'll need to move. But toward what? And away from what? Those answers aren't ready to come yet. You don't plan it. Not really. It starts as a simple, gnawing thought: you need food. That salted pork from before Hastings feels like something you dreamed rather than actually ate. Your stomach isn't just empty. It's staging quiet protests in slow, twisting waves. And water? You had a mouthful from a stream yesterday morning. Since then, nothing but the damp air in your lungs. You watch the Normans from the edge of the trees until the sun's high enough that the frost has melted from the grass. The camp moves like a well-trained organism, parts working in rhythm without anyone needing to shout much. They've built cook fires, big ones, and the smell is infuriating. Roasting meat, fresh bread, something spiced you can't place. The scent wraps around your ribs and drags you forward before your brain has fully caught up. Stupid, reckless. You tell yourself you're just going to circle closer, get a better view, maybe see if any of the villagers are still around. But the truth? Part of you wants to step right into the open and snatch whatever you can. You skirt the camp's outer edge, staying low behind the hedgerows and tufts of winter grass. Every few steps, you pause to listen. Distant laughter, the rhythmic rasp of a whetstone on a blade, the occasional clink of armor. Twice, you drop flat when a Norman passes too close, once so near you can hear the leather of his boots creak. At the far side of the camp, you find what you were hoping for. A pile of supplies not yet sorted. Crates, sacks, and barrels stacked haphazardly near a small tent. A guard sits on a stool, head tilted back, eyes half shut in the weak sun. His spear leans against the tent beside him, out of his immediate reach. You wait. 10 heartbeats. 20. The man's head lolls a little, chin dipping, then jerking back up. Sleep is flirting with him hard. A diversion would help. But you don't have one. You've only got timing and nerves. When the guard's chin dips again, you move. It's not a run, too noisy, but a fast, bent shuffle, keeping low enough that the stacks hide most of you. Your fingers close on the nearest sack. Grain, maybe? You don't check. You just drag it into the brush. Then another, smaller, softer, smelling faintly of onions. You've got both clutched awkwardly in your arms when a shout cracks the air. Not at you. Not yet. Somewhere else in the camp, voices are raised, boots thudding. The guard straightens, squints toward the noise, and steps away from his post. You don't waste the gift. You melt back into the trees, careful not to snap a twig, hugging your stolen food like it's a child you're smuggling to safety. When you're far enough that the camp's sounds fade, you collapse against a fallen log. You force yourself to eat slowly, handfuls of grain chewed raw, a couple of onions peeled with shaking fingers. It's not a feast, but your body reacts like you've just been crowned king. Somewhere between the third and fourth mouthful, you realize you've also learned something. The Normans' guard rotation isn't flawless. They can be distracted. And if you can slip in for food, maybe you can slip in for other things. You tell yourself it's a bad idea. But bad ideas have a way of feeling almost noble when they're wrapped in desperation. The food you stole bought you a day of strength, maybe two, but something else gnaws at you harder than hunger now: curiosity. You want to know what the Normans are planning. Not gossip from the edge of a field, not guesses from villagers. Real information, the kind you can only get if you're close enough to smell the oil on their armor. Dusk helps. It drapes the camp in long shadows and sets the fires glowing orange against the dark. From the ridge, The Norman banners sway lazily in the wind, their colors muted in the low light. You wait until the sentries change. Something you noticed yesterday happens just after the sun dips below the tree line. One group marches off, another takes their place, and for a few moments the edges of the camp feel softer, less guarded. This time, you leave the hedgerows and slip along a shallow gully. Your boots sink quietly into damp earth, and the smell of moss and old leaves clings to you, maybe enough to mask your scent from the horses tethered nearby. They still twitch their ears when you pass, but none snort or stomp. The tent you're aiming for is the same one you saw 2 days ago, the one with the rough plank table and the map weighted by knives. Tonight, the flap hangs open. Inside, firelight dances over parchment, metal, and the polished hilt of a sword laid neatly within reach. You press yourself to the side, listening. South coast secure before winter. A voice says in that Norman French that's starting to sound less alien to your ear. Another replies lower, and the rest? North, still Saxon pockets. Let them sit, the first says. We break them later. Now it's about supply, not glory. Boots scrape on dirt, and the sound of charcoal scratching over parchment follows. You risk a glance around the edge. For men, armor unbuckled but close by, lean over the map. One taps at a cluster of marks inland. This hill fort, if we take it, the rest of the valley bends. It's not just war talk. It's a blueprint. You don't know the names, but you recognize the method. They're building a net, and England is the fish. Then something odd. A younger soldier, not part of the main group, ducks in to deliver a small wooden chest. It's placed on the table without ceremony, but all 4 men pause to watch it. The leader opens it just enough for a dull gold glint to catch the firelight. Coins? Or something more? You lean in unconsciously, trying to see. The bark is sharp, close, and aimed at you. One of the sentries, not 10 paces away, stands with a spear angled toward your ribs. Your body moves before your mind does. You duck low, shove off the ground, and sprint back into the gully. Shouts rise behind you, boot steps hammering after you. But the gully curves, and you know the terrain better. A fallen branch snags your sleeve, nearly spinning you around. But you tear free and keep going until the voices fade to angry echoes. You don't stop until you're deep in the dark again, bent over, lungs burning. You didn't get caught, not properly. But now the Normans know someone's been too close. They'll tighten the edges of that net. And you've just made yourself the kind of trouble they plan for. It starts with the sound of hammers. Not war drums, not swords clashing. Just the steady thud of wood on iron, deep in the night. You're already half awake, curled in a damp hollow under a beech tree, when the rhythm draws your mind into focus. The Normans are working, building. You creep up the slope until you can see the camp from between bare branches. New posts are going into the ground, tall, sharpened, spaced close. Torches throw shadows of men moving like clockwork, and along the perimeter you spot more helmets than before. Double the guards. You'd bet your last crumb of bread it's because of last night. Because of you. Your stomach knots. This little patch of woodland has been your hiding place for days. But if they keep expanding, you'll wake up with a spear at your throat. You start packing your meager belongings. Half a sack of grain, a strip of cloth, the rusty knife you dug out of the mud, and slip deeper into the trees. The wind is sharp, carrying the smell of wet soil and wood smoke. Every time a twig snaps underfoot, you flinch, half expecting a Norman shout. Hours later, your legs ache and your breath fogs in the cold. But you find it, a ruined chapel. Its roof is gone, and moss chokes the stones. But the walls still stand high enough to hide you. The doorway's half blocked by a fallen lintel, and inside the air is damp but still. You settle in one corner, grateful for even this meager shelter, and try to quiet your thoughts. That's when you hear it, a footstep. Soft, deliberate. Not the heavy, even tread of an armored soldier, but lighter, quicker. A figure steps through the gap in the wall. Cloak drawn tight, hood shadowing the face. "You're in my spot," the voice says. Female, crisp. You tense, knife in hand. Plenty of ruin to go around. The hood tilts slightly, like she's weighing you. Then she steps forward into the moonlight seeping through the missing roof. Her face is pale, eyes quick and assessing. Not a villager, you'd remember her. And not Norman either. Her clothes are worn in the Saxon style, though patched and travel-stained. "They're tightening their watch," she says simply, like it's a fact you've both been tracking. "Means we can't linger. You should ask who she is, how she knows about the camp, why she's here." But she's already moving, crouching to dig something from beneath a loose floor stone. A bundle, wrapped in oilcloth. When she peels it back, you catch a glint of steel, short sword, whetstone. A small pouch that jingles faintly. "You don't look like much," she says, not unkindly. "But you're not afraid to get close. That's useful." You realize she's not here to rob you. She's here to decide if you're worth keeping alive. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a Norman horn cuts the night. She glances toward the sound, then back at you. "We move before dawn. Decide if you're coming." Then she's gone, slipping through the wall like smoke. You sit there a moment longer, the damp stone cold against your back, wondering if you've just met your salvation or your doom. You don't sleep. The horn in the distance keeps echoing in your head, as if the Normans are breathing down your neck even here in the chapel's shadows. By the time the first pale gray leaks into the sky, you've already made up your mind. You're following her. The air is raw with dawn cold, biting at your fingers and ears. You shoulder your small bundle and slip through the gap in the wall, scanning the tree line. She's there, leaning against a twisted oak, arms folded, like she knew you'd come. "Good," she says without a smile. "Keep up. Don't talk unless I do." She moves fast, not wasting a step. The forest around you is still soaked in night, and each time you catch her silhouette ahead, it's in pieces. An elbow here, a glimpse of cloak there, like the woods are helping her vanish between heartbeats. By mid-morning, your legs are screaming, but she hasn't slowed. Birds begin to stir overhead, their song thin in the cold air. You pass a half-burned cart abandoned in the undergrowth, a sign the Normans have been this way. She doesn't look at it, but you catch the quickening of her stride. Eventually, the terrain shifts, thicker bramble, ground sloping upward. She ducks under a low branch, and you follow only to nearly trip over a rope snare set across the path. She glances back just long enough to say, "They like to test if you're paying attention." "They?" You manage, breathless, but she's already moving again, weaving through the undergrowth until a rock face rises ahead, mottled with ivy. She presses her hand to one particular section, knocks twice, and steps aside. The ivy stirs, not from wind, but from hands on the other side pulling it back to reveal a narrow opening. Two men stand there, both dressed in patched wool and leather, eyes sharp. One gives you a look that says, "I could send you back into the trees right now." The other nods to her. "Brought a stray. Brought someone who's been close enough to smell their campfires," she replies. "Might be worth feeding." Inside, the air smells of earth and wood smoke. The passage widens into a cavern lit by a central fire pit, its smoke drifting upward through a hole in the rock. A handful of figures sit or crouch nearby, mending clothes, sharpening blades, or staring at maps scratched into slabs of bark. You catch fragments of conversation, troop movements, supply shortages, coded warnings. She drops her bundle next to a bedroll and finally turns to you. Welcome to people the Normans think don't exist. We prefer it that way. A wiry old man by the fire looks up, eyes narrowing. If you're here, you either want revenge or you're running. Which is it? You open your mouth, but before you can answer, a younger voice from the shadows says, "Doesn't matter. Both bleed the same when the fighting starts." The woman cuts in. "He'll earn his keep. Then to you eat. Listen. Don't speak unless you've got something worth saying." As you chew on a hunk of coarse bread, warmth creeping back into your limbs, you realize you've stumbled into something larger than your hunger or your hiding place. These aren't just stragglers. They're a net of their own, silent, patient, waiting for the right pull. And now you're tangled in it. They don't tell you when it's happening, only that it's tonight. The fire in the cavern burns lower than usual, everyone conserving their voices, their glances, their energy. Your stomach is tight, not from hunger this time, but from the way the air feels like a held breath. The woman, whose name you still haven't learned, hands you a wool-lined leather jerkin and a strip of dark cloth. Wrap it over your mouth and nose. Stops your breath from flashing white in the moonlight. It smells faintly of smoke and pine. You tie it in place, and suddenly the cave feels quieter, like even your breathing has to stay hidden. They move out in small groups, filtering into the forest in separate directions. You stick close to her, trying to match her silent footwork. Every sound you make, a twig snap, a boot sliding in damp leaves, feels like you've just lit a beacon. By the time you reach the edge of the Norman supply route, the moon is high. The track is a thin scar through the woods, lit faintly by torches planted in the ground. Ahead, you see them. A line of ox-drawn carts, each loaded with sacks and barrels, escorted by maybe a dozen Norman soldiers. The plan, whispered back in the cavern, was simple enough. Hit them where they're weakest, scatter the guards, take what you can carry. The reality is a knot of tension in your gut as you lie belly down in the frost-damp grass, waiting for a signal you're not sure you'll recognize. Comes as a bird call, too sharp, too perfect to be real. The woman shifts beside you, then melts into motion. Everything happens in bursts. A shadowed figure darts across the road ahead of the first cart, scattering the oxen. One cart lurches sideways, spilling barrels into the ditch. A torch flares brighter, then drops into a cartload of hay. Flames leap up, and the Norman guards shout in confusion. You're on your feet before you know it, rushing forward. Someone shoves a sack into your hands. Grain heavy as stone, and you drag it toward the treeline. A soldier's shout cuts across the chaos, and you spin to see one charging, sword raised. Then the woman is there, blocking his swing with her short sword, turning the blade aside with a screech of metal. She drives her elbow into his chest, sending him stumbling back. "Move!" she hisses at you, and you don't need telling twice. By the time you reach the hidden path to the cavern, your arms are burning and your breath is ragged. Behind you, the sounds of the skirmish fade into the night shouts, the crack of wood, the pop of burning grain. Inside the cavern, the others are already piling loot. Sacks of flour, barrels of salted fish, bundles of cloth. Someone laughs, short, relieved, and someone else starts dividing portions. The woman drops onto a low stool, wipes her blade on her sleeve, and finally looks at you properly. "You didn't freeze," she says. "That's something." You realize you're smiling, even though your hands are still trembling. For the first time in weeks, you feel like you've taken something back. But the old man by the fire doesn't join the laughter. He stares into the flames and says, "They'll tighten their grip after this. We've woken the snake." The snake strikes faster than you expect. It starts with the absence of sound. No bird song in the morning, no rustle of squirrels in the undergrowth. Even the wind seems to have decided it's safer not to pass through these trees. The woman notices first, freezing mid-step as she returns from checking the snares. "They're here," she says quietly, as if naming it might pull them closer. By midday, smoke begins to thread upward from somewhere beyond the ridge. Not the loose, lazy smoke of a hearth. This is thick, oily, and hungry. Someone bursts into the cavern, face pale beneath a smear of dirt. "They've found 2 of the caches," he gasps. "Burned them, and they're sweeping east." The old man's voice is flat. "They'll be circling here before nightfall." The next hours blur into a frantic rhythm. Sacks dragged deeper into the tunnels, weapons bundled and hidden, sleeping pallets rolled away. You help ferry what you can, your arms aching, lungs sharp from the dust. When the first sound of boots on leaves reaches you, it's like a drumbeat through your ribs. The woman gestures sharply, and everyone melts into side tunnels or behind rock shelves. You wedge yourself into a narrow crevice, heart pounding so loudly you're sure it'll echo. The Normans arrive not as a shout, but as a creeping tide shapes between the trees, shields catching stray glints of light. You see their leader, a tall man with a chainmail coif, his gaze raking the undergrowth like he can smell fear. They find the main cavern easily. One torch arcs through the entrance and lands near the fire pit, spilling light over empty bedrolls. The leader steps in, takes a slow turn, and mutters something in French that makes 2 of his men laugh. You can't catch the words, but the tone is the same in any language: mockery. Then his boot nudges one of the barrels left behind. He pries it open, pulls out a salted fish, and bites into it as casually as if this were his camp. That's when a hidden figure behind him, one of yours, moves. A blade flashes in the gloom. The strike is quick, but not quick enough. A Norman shield swings up, the steel rings with the impact, and the cavern explodes into shouting. You press yourself deeper into the rock, cold stone biting your cheek, as the fight turns chaotic. Steel on steel, grunts, the dull thud of bodies hitting the ground. Through the narrow gap, you see the woman appear behind the leader, her short sword angling for a killing blow. But one of his men catches sight of her and bellows, charging. She turns to meet him, and in that heartbeat, the leader slips away toward the tunnel you're hiding in. He stops just short of your crevice. His eyes sweep the shadows, and for a terrible second, they lock with yours. Then a shout from deeper in the cavern pulls him away, and he's gone. When it's over, the Normans retreat with 3 of your people in tow, their hands bound, their heads bowed. The cavern smells of blood and torch smoke. The old man breaks the silence. "We can't stay here. Not anymore." Feels like losing a home you'd barely begun to believe in. Night doesn't fall so much as it pours over you, swallowing the last smear of sunset behind the ridge. You move in single file, no one speaking above a whisper. The forest floor is soft with moss and old leaves, but every step still sounds too loud in your ears. Somewhere behind, far enough that you almost doubt it, a dog barks, short, clipped, searching. The woman walks ahead of you, the faint gleam of her hair catching the moonlight when it slips between the branches. She doesn't look back, but her hand goes up once, fingers spread. Everyone freezes. You strain your ears, and there it is, a low rustle, the faint clink of metal from the west. Norman scouts moving parallel. The old man gestures toward a narrow deer track that veers off into denser thickets. "Faster," he murmurs. You follow, ducking under branches that claw at your cloak, mud tugging at your boots. The cold air burns your lungs, but stopping isn't an option. Hours stretch. Your shoulders ache from the weight of the pack, your legs from the uneven ground. And yet moments of strange beauty flicker through the fatigue. The pale bloom of night flowers along the path, the sudden flare of an owl's wings above, the way frost glitters like spilled stars when the moonlight hits the grass. At one point, you pass the blackened shell of a hut. The beams are charred to brittle spines, and the smell of old smoke still clings. Someone mutters a prayer. You can't help but picture the people who live there, their voices gone like the embers. When the group finally stops, it's at the mouth of a ravine, where a stream runs cold and fast. The sound of water muffles your breathing and masks your footsteps. The woman crouches, running her fingers through the current. "If they follow, the stream will hide our trail," she says. You descend into the ravine, the damp air wrapping around you like a chill cloak. The path narrows until you're walking ankle-deep in the stream itself, boots soaking, toes numbing. The cold is a sharp reminder that you're still here, still moving. Somewhere ahead, lantern light glimmers. Warm, inviting, and deeply suspicious. The old man signals for silence, and the group edges forward. You round a bend and see it. A crude shelter of branches and canvas, huddled against the rock wall. Inside, a single figure sits by a small fire, turning something over the flames. It's not a Norman. The man looks older than the hills, skin weathered, beard tangled. His eyes flick to yours, calm and measuring, as though he's been expecting you all along. He doesn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he gestures to the fire and says in a low voice, "You'll want to keep moving before the frost bites. But if you've the courage, I know a place the Normans won't dare follow." The woman studies him, unreadable. The rest of the group shifts uneasily, torn between suspicion and the lure of safety. The old man by the fire simply waits, the flames painting gold across his lined face. The fire's glow dances in the stranger's eyes, and for a moment, you forget the cold water soaking through your boots. No one speaks first. The group stands like a collection of shadow puppets in the ravine, the stream curling around your ankles with a sound that feels far too loud. You can sense everyone measuring the man. His calmness, the way his hands rest on his knees instead of near a blade. That stillness is almost unnerving. The woman breaks the silence. "And why," she says slowly, "would the Normans avoid this place you speak of?" The old man at the fire doesn't answer right away. He reaches for a stick, stirs the embers, and lets the sparks drift up before saying, "Because they think it cursed. A hollow in the hills, where the ground swallows horses and men vanish in fog thicker than smoke. But I've walked it. The land has moods, not curses. It's a tempting thought, a place the enemy fears. But you've heard enough stories to know cursed often just means even worse than usual." The old man of your group leans in toward the woman. "If he's telling the truth, it could buy us weeks. Maybe more," someone else mutters. "If he's lying, it could be the end of us before dawn." The stranger just keeps watching, eyes never wavering. "I'm offering the path. Walk it or don't." His voice is even like he has no stake in your choice. The woman glances back at all of you. For a breath, her eyes settle on yours, as if weighing your thoughts. But you're too busy listening to the forest because somewhere very faintly you hear that dog bark again. The decision makes itself. "Lead us," she says. The stranger nods once, almost as though you've confirmed what he expected. He douses his fire with the stream, slings a leather satchel over his shoulder, and starts walking upstream. You follow, the group strung out behind him like beads on a string. The ravine narrows, the walls rising until moonlight is just a pale ribbon far above. The water grows colder, the stones slicker underfoot. At one point, you think you hear something moving in the dark water beside you. A faint ripple that disappears before you can be sure. Hours pass in this half-light world. You stop counting the turns and crossings, the moments you have to squeeze sideways between dripping rock faces. Eventually, the ravine opens into a small clearing choked with mist, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. This, the stranger says softly, is where most turn back. The fog curls around your legs, swallowing your knees, then your waist. Shapes move in it, too quick to be trees swaying, too large to be deer. Your skin prickles, and you suddenly understand why Normans might whisper of curses. The woman tightens her grip on her sword. "Keep close," she warns. The stranger smiles faintly. Closer than that. Somewhere in the whiteness ahead, something lets out a low, almost human sigh. The mist doesn't just hang in the air. It breathes. You feel it sliding over your cheeks, damp and cool, carrying a faint metallic tang like old blood or rusted iron. Each inhalation tastes faintly of stone cellars and rainwater left too long in the barrel. The stranger's silhouette is just ahead, blurred and shifting as if the fog is trying to erase him with slow, careful strokes. The woman orders everyone to link hands. You feel the cold, rough grip of the old man behind you, and you clasp the wrist of the person in front. The streambed has flattened, but the ground is soft under your boots, sucking at each step like it wants to keep you here. Somewhere to your right, you hear splashes, out of rhythm with your group. They pause when you pause. Resume when you move. It's not the Normans. The sound is too light, too curious. The stranger doesn't look back. His voice drifts through the fog. Don't follow the whispers. It sounds absurd until you hear them yourself. A faint chorus, no louder than a sigh, threading between the mist curls. Not words, not exactly, but the rise and fall mimics conversation. The longer you listen, the more your mind tries to find patterns in them. The old man's hand on yours tightens suddenly, and you see why. One of the younger boys in the group is leaning toward the sound, his eyes glassy. The woman yanks him back sharply. "Eyes on the path," she snaps. The stranger stops at a fallen oak, its trunk slick with moss, and kneels. "We go under," he says. You crouch, crawling through the damp arch. On the other side, the fog feels denser, but the sound changes. Less whispering, more a low hum, like the drone of a hive. The air is warmer, too, and you realize the mist here isn't drifting. It's rising, pulled from the ground itself. Then you see it, the hollow, a basin in the earth, ringed with leaning birches and broken stones carved with symbols worn to blurs. The mist pools thickest at the center, hiding whatever lies beneath. The hum seems to come from there, vibrating through the soles of your boots. "This is where we part," the stranger says. The woman bristles. "You're leading us straight into it?" He shrugs. "You wanted a place Normans won't follow. You'll find no horse can ride here, no torch will burn bright. If you keep to the rim, you'll see paths out eventually." The group murmurs uneasily. You can't see more than a few yards ahead, but you feel the hollow watching you if a place can watch. And then movement. A shape rises from the center fog, tall and slender, shifting as though made of smoke and bone. Turns its head toward you. The whispers start again. This time they sound like they know your name. You don't move at first. No one does. The shape in the center of the hollow sways, slow as seaweed under a current, and each time it tilts toward you, the whispers grow sharper, clearer. They don't just sound like your name now, they sound like an invitation. The woman tightens her hold on the boy's shoulder. "Stay behind me," she says, but her voice is too thin to sound like a command. The stranger is already stepping backward into the fog, as if his role here is finished. You try to call after him, but the hum of the hollow swallows your words. When you blink, he's gone. The old man mutters, "I've seen this in a dream." His fingers tremble in yours. You take your first step down into the basin. The ground is springy, like walking on a mattress soaked through, and each step sinks you slightly deeper. The mist wraps tighter, sliding cool fingers up your neck and into your hair. You swear you can feel it testing you, like a cat sniffing a stranger's hand. The shape ahead doesn't retreat. It waits. As you draw closer, you see it isn't solid. It's a column of smoke spiraling upward, anchored to the ground by something unseen. Through its shifting body, you catch glimpses of black water, rippling in slow motion. The whispers knit themselves into something almost like language. Not yet. Not all of you. Your skin prickles. The boy behind you jerks free of the woman's hand and sprints toward the figure. You lunge after him, but the mist thickens, suddenly heavy, pushing against your chest. The boy's outline blurs, then vanishes into the smoke column with barely a ripple. The hum stops. The silence that follows is so deep you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. Then, from somewhere far above, a single raven croaks. The sound slices through the stillness, and you realize you can see farther now. Past the hollow's rim, through thinning mist toward a break in the trees. The woman's face is pale but steady. We move. Now. You climb the far side, legs burning, the damp soil trying to hold you back. At the top, you risk a glance over your shoulder. The figure is gone. The mist remains, but it looks tired, as if the hollow has eaten its fill for the night. By the time you reach the tree line, the hum is only a memory, replaced by the ordinary night chorus of owls and rustling leaves. The group keeps walking without speaking. No one asks about the boy. Somewhere ahead, beyond the trees, a faint light winks, too steady for fireflies, too soft for torches. The woman doesn't slow. "That's where we sleep," she says, though you can tell she's not sure. The light draws you in the way a campfire does on a cold night. Not with heat, but with the promise of something human. Each step toward it peels away the forest sounds until there's only the crunch of your boots on leaf litter and the faint hush of wind combing through high branches. You emerge into a clearing. The light isn't from a torch at all. It's from a cluster of glass jars strung in a low arc between two leaning oaks. Inside each jar, a small, steady glow pulses like a heartbeat. The air here feels warmer, calmer, as if the mist you left behind can't cross this invisible border. The woman lets go of her pack for the first time since you met her. She kneels to run her fingers over the moss, as if checking it's real. The old man sits heavily on a flat stone, his breath shaking out in quiet bursts. No one mentions the boy or the hollow or the stranger who vanished. You set your own bag down and lean against one of the oaks. His bark is warm, almost like skin. Overhead, the glass jars sway gently, the light within each one blinking in slow, syncopated patterns. You find yourself matching your breathing to their rhythm. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you notice the smell. Faint honey, wildflowers, and something you can't quite place, like the pages of an old book. It's comforting and a little sad. The woman speaks in a low voice, not looking at anyone. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we keep moving. We don't go back." The old man just nods. His eyes are fixed on the lights, reflecting in them like tiny constellations. You close your own eyes for a moment, and the images from the night drift past. The riverbank, the fog, the hollow's breathing mist. They feel far away now, like a dream you'll half forget by morning. Your muscles loosen, heavy in that pleasant way they do after a long day's walk. The air hums faintly, not the deep, bone-vibrating hum of the hollow, but something softer, more like the thrum of a cat against your chest. The ground beneath you feels solid and safe. The lights above dim slightly, as if lowering the room's brightness before sleep. You hear the woman's voice again, closer this time, almost a whisper. "Rest now. We'll need you strong. Her words fade into the rustle of leaves. Your thoughts slow, each one stretching further apart until they dissolve entirely. The clearing blurs at the edges. The light becomes a gentle haze. Your breathing evens out. The night wraps around you, neither cold nor warm, just right. And as the last conscious thread slips away, you think you hear the jars hum in unison, carrying you somewhere quieter still.